and final webinar for members for 2016. The theme of this year's series has been collaboration in all forms and formats, and today's webinar is no exception. It continues the conversation with a look at collaborative History Day projects. Our presenters today are Lisa Speer, the State Historian and Director of the Arkansas State Library, Arkansas State Archives, and a CoSA board member. Sorry about that, Lisa. And Brian Irby, who's an archival assistant at the State Archives of Arkansas. And Linda Johnson, an archivist at the California State Archives, who is the program lead for education and outreach. Our moderator is John Metz, who hails from the Library of Virginia and is a member of the CoSA Program Committee. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to John to take it away. You may want to do a little bit more introduction of our presenters, but I'll let you take over the mic and start the program.
Thanks, Ann. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and in case you've been living under a rock since 1974, National History Day is a really incredible event. It's a academic competition that really focuses on students in grades 4 through 12 to teach historical literacy and research skills. It was the brainchild of David Van Tessel, professor at Case Western Reserve University, and it really moved from Cleveland, and it now involves nearly 1 million students and tens of thousands of teachers each year. And this year, the theme is taking a stand in history. So we're going to hear a little about the collaborations that are occurring in Arkansas and California. And we're first going to hear from Lisa and Brian from Arkansas, and I'll give you a little background on them. Dr. Lisa Speer is State Historian and Director of the Arkansas State Archives since June 2013. Speer's worked in the field of archives for 23 years. Formerly, she worked in the Special Collections Division of the University of Mississippi in Oxford and the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. For almost 13 years, she was head of Special Collections at Southeast Missouri State University in Cape Girardeau, my hometown. And she holds an MA and PhD in American History from the University of Mississippi and a master's degree in Library Science from the University of Alabama. In August, she was elected to serve a 3-year term on the CoSA Board of Directors. She also serves as a member of the CoSA Education and Training Committee and is coached. And now we'll hear a little more about Brian Irby. Brian is an archival assistant at the Arkansas State Archives. He's been at the ASA since 2008 and has been involved in a number of projects helping to preserve Arkansas's documentary history. He holds a BA and MA in history from the University of Central Arkansas in Conway, Arkansas, and he's been involved in working on educational programs for the Arkansas State Archives for at least 2 years. And I think I forgot to mention that Lisa has her BA from Ouachita. I had to throw that in because it's such a difficult name to say, but there we go. Well, Lisa and Brian, take it away.
Well, thank you, John, for that lovely introduction, and hello, everybody. My colleague Brian Irby and I are very excited to have this opportunity to talk about the Arkansas State Archives experience in developing an outreach initiative that not only supports teachers and students who are working on History Day projects, but also for their everyday classroom experience. If you're having any difficulty hearing either one of us as we're going along, please just type a note in the chat box, or if you've got any questions, feel free to just type those in the chat box as we're going along, and we'll try to answer them. I know that a lot of archival repositories are involved with History Day in a variety of ways, through leading seminars for teachers and students, in hosting student groups, researching topics, in judging at the state and local competitions, and sponsoring awards for History Day. And the State Archives in Arkansas has done a little bit of most of those things. But what Brian and I are going to talk about today is an initiative that we started in 2013 that takes really a longer-term view of building a base of support for social studies teachers and their students than kind of a one-off event. And we feel like our initiative, while it's perhaps not as easy to measure as having a class visit your archives, it's provided us with an effective way to use our small staff and our limited resources to reach a broader audience than we probably could have any other way. And I should preface our discussion of our initiative with a statement about the state archives and our holdings. While we are the repository for official state records, a good deal of energy has been focused over our 111-year history on developing our historical manuscript holdings. So we have primary source materials reflecting the history of the area that's now Arkansas from the late 17th century forward, beginning with the settlement at Arkansas Post to pretty modern day records. See if I can move our slides forward. There we go. So in 2013, we started talking about reaching out to new audiences. Within the state, we had gotten pigeonholed as the place to go for genealogy. Please don't misunderstand me. We value the patronage of our family history researchers. They are an important support base for us, but we knew that our collections could be used for many purposes beyond family history research. So the staff discussion led to the start of several initiatives to increase our visibility and promote our collections to audiences or beyond audiences who already use the archives, and one of those initiatives was this one for K-12. In thinking about how to reach Arkansas teachers, we realized we had some challenges to overcome. We knew that we had amazing primary source material that could be used to support History Day and classroom teaching, but the question became how to get teachers to use it. We recognize that it's challenging for teachers to bring student groups to the state archives for a number of reasons. They lack funding for travel. There are time constraints during the semester because they're preparing for standardized testing and their schedule is to some degree built around that. And sometimes it's difficult to convince your administrator of the necessity of traveling for things like conducting research for History Day. I mean, you can just Google everything. It's all on the internet, right? We also thought it was unrealistic to expect that significant numbers of teachers were going to use their free time to come to the state archives to find primary sources. They're working when we're open, or they don't want to use their limited free time on Saturday for more work. That's reasonable. And also, if they do make the time to come into the archives to do research, archival research can be daunting if it's not something you've done on a regular basis. So our staff discussions led us to the conclusion that we would need to deliver the content to teachers in a way that would make them likely to use it. And I think of it now as sort of like those blue apron boxes, I think they're called, when you get all the fresh ingredients you need to make a meal and a recipe and it's delivered to your door. Except in our case, what we would be delivering were the primary sources embedded in a lesson plan with everything an Arkansas teacher would need to immediately put it to use in their classroom. Perhaps another big challenge, maybe even the biggest one for us, was staffing. We have a small staff of 26 people spread out over 3 locations, but also we're archivists. We're not social studies educators. And none of us who were working on this initiative had made lesson plans before. We did try unsuccessfully during the last biennium budget session to get an educational specialist position for the archives. That would have enabled us to hire somebody with the skills and the knowledge needed to carry this initiative forward. Our request did receive executive approval from a lame duck governor, but during the spring legislative session, the Joint Budget Committee stripped the position out of the budget, citing needing to keep government small. And apparently our one position would have just caused government to expand exponentially. So fortunately, we had interest among the staff to keep the initiative going. As with many projects, this one started out as a planning group effort with about 5 people volunteering to manage various associated tasks. But also, as with many group projects, it ended up largely and now exclusively being carried forward by one person, my colleague Brian, who's going to be talking to you shortly. When I came to the Arkansas State Archives in 2013, Brian was an archival assistant who was working on indexing land records, but he expressed an interest in working with outreach and education, and fortunately I've been able to reallocate some responsibilities to better fit the individual interests of staff and better fit organizational needs. I would prefer that staff job titles actually reflect the work that they're doing, because that means that the pay that they receive is commensurate, but Brian's interest and abilities are the only reason that we've been able to make this project successful to date, and I'm very grateful to him for his work on it. One thing that really gave us a boost to get this initiative going was when the Arkansas Humanities Council approached us in early 2014 with the idea for a partnership. And that little ducky trying to get over the wall, that's us, and that's the Arkansas Humanities Council coming up behind us to give us a boost to get over the wall. So the Humanities Council asked us to draft a plan of work on what we thought we could accomplish in 1 year, and they would provide $5,000 in funding for our activities. They were so helpful, even beyond providing the funding, in brainstorming a plan of work for us, because the Arkansas Humanities Council has hosted numerous teacher workshops, so they had a lot of connections with teachers around the state, and they really had some great ideas for how we could get our initiative off the ground. Ultimately, what we agreed to do in our contract with them was to create 6 lesson plans for middle school age students based on primary sources from our resources, and we would decide what the topics would be. And once those lesson plans were created, they would be reviewed by a select group of Arkansas teachers. And again, the Humanities Council was very helpful in providing names of teachers who would ultimately compose the review board or the advisory board for us. And we ended up with a very diverse group of teachers. We had statewide representation, teachers from private and public schools, a representative from the state's digital academy. We had representation from all grade levels, elementary through high school, and even though we thought we were originally going to focus on middle school, that diverse representation ended up being very helpful, and I'll explain why in a moment. The teachers were primarily, but not just, social studies educators. We had an English language arts teacher and a librarian, and that was also helpful, although at the time we were putting the advisory board together, we didn't know why that was going to be helpful. We agreed that all the project materials we were going to create would credit the Humanities Council, and that we would promote the resources at our teacher workshops and on our website. Because it was a Humanities Council-sponsored project, we were required to have humanities scholars. We had 5. The Humanities Council doesn't dictate a specific number, but we enlisted the support of 1 academic historian who specializes in Arkansas history, and 3 historians who lead social studies educator programs at 3 Arkansas universities. And one of those historians is also the State History Day coordinator. And then we had 1 English professor who had a background in curriculum design and assessment among our humanities scholars. So at the outset of the project, this is how we allocated the $5,000 from the Humanities Council. But as with most grant budgets, you never quite spend the amount you think you're going to spend where you think you're going to spend it. The good news is that we came in way under budget. We saved some funds on the stipends that we had allocated for teachers. We had planned to have 14 teachers participate in our workshop where they would get together to give us feedback on the lesson plans. Ultimately, we had 11 teachers attend. There were a few last-minute cancellations. We saved funding on the overnight accommodations for the teachers who traveled from out of the region. We learned that teachers are very frugal. Most of them drove in and back home on the same day, even though they knew that funding was available to reimburse them for lodging overnight. I think only 1 teacher took us up on the overnight accommodations. And while we had also factored in mileage on an individual basis for the teachers who participated, several of them coming from the same regions of the state carpooled. and then 2 of the 5 humanities scholars turned down the $100 honorariums. So that helped us save quite a bit of funding. We ended up with just over $2,000 in unspent grant funds. Generously, the Humanities Council director said, we don't want that money back, figure out a way to use it in connection with the initiative. And I will tell you how we ended up doing that. But first, I'd like to just summarize what we accomplished during this part of the initiative. We did create 6 lesson plans with embedded primary source documents, and 5 of those were sent out in advance to the teachers 1 month prior to our summer workshop. The 6th plan we presented on the day of the workshop. Leading up to the workshop, Brian and I had been very concerned that we would get all the teachers in the room and they wouldn't have anything to say, and we would have 6 hours of just sitting in front of them trying to pull feedback out of them, and we were so wrong about what happened. They had a lot to say, and their feedback was really valuable. They told us what they liked about the lesson plans, what they didn't like, what they would use in their classrooms, what they would never use, what they wish we had done, what they wanted us to change, what they wanted us to add, and so on. And Brian was a trooper. He sat up at the front of the room and took copious notes for the full 3 hours that we reviewed the lesson plans. And I'll share some of the key things that we took away from them, from the workshop. We had given every lesson plan an Arkansas title, like Arkansas in the Great Depression or Arkansas during Reconstruction. And one of the teachers, a world history teacher, advised us not to do that because she felt the plans had usefulness beyond Arkansas history, but administrators would see the word Arkansas and tell her, you can't use this, you don't teach Arkansas history. So moving forward, we tried to de-accentuate Arkansas, at least in our lesson plan titles. Obviously, our resources are still built around what we specialize in, which is Arkansas history. Another thing we took away from the workshops was we had quite naturally, I think, focused on social studies educators and crafting the lesson plans to focus on social studies. But having teachers from other disciplines like English language arts and a librarian made us more aware of how useful that these plans could be across the curriculum. The ELA teacher who participated in the workshop opened my eyes and Brian's to the concept of using archival documents to create found poetry. I can say that was something I had not been aware of before working with this particular group of teachers. One thing that we had already discovered on our own, but it was certainly reinforced by the teacher workshop, was the need to think beyond creating plans for just middle school age students. Some topics just don't lend themselves to middle school particularly well. I think after we finished the Reconstruction plan, we stepped back and looked at it, and clearly it was not middle school level. It was appropriate for a high school audience, but it was just too complex the way we had created it for a middle school audience. And I think the way we're doing plans now, we certainly focus on a grade level, but we have a range of activities that are suitable for a number of grades. And our humanities scholars were very helpful with working with us on developing the structure of the plans, how they should look, and the elements that they should contain. The teachers conveyed that they would make a quick decision to use or not use the plan sometimes just based on looking at the curriculum frameworks or the Common Core standards. So that was important for us to know in moving forward. So at the end of the project, we still had money to spend. So what did we do with it? Well, I'm very pleased to say that the Humanities Council was so happy with what we accomplished that they offered us a second round of funding, another $5,000, and we had the $2,000 left over from Phase 1. So we used the $7,000 roughly in Phase 2 for promotion. We felt like we couldn't adopt a build it and they will come mentality with this project. So Brian, who again is a trooper, agreed to go on the road all over Arkansas in summer 2015. The original plan was that we, and when I say we, I mean he, would visit all 15 of the state's educational cooperatives and do full or half-day workshops promoting the State Archives resources and this lesson plan initiative. and the duration of the workshops would depend entirely on what each co-op was willing to schedule. Brian, I think, ended up visiting 9 of the 15 co-ops. He did contact all 15, but not all of the cooperatives were cooperative. He scheduled, I think, 10 of workshops, but one of the co-ops forgot to write it on their calendar, so that is why ultimately he visited 9 of the 15 co-ops. The visits reached a total of about 102 teachers. It's a good number. It's maybe not as many as we would have liked, but on the positive side, his visits had a very measurable impact. Our lesson plans and the supplementary primary sources are all uploaded into Content DM and available online. And after each co-op visit, our collection use stats would show significant increases. And by the time Brian finished the co-op visits, the overall online use of the materials had increased by over 63%. Another positive that came out of Phase 2 was that we created 4 more lesson plans, which was not something that contractually we agreed to do with the Humanities Council. But Brian is just unstoppable. He just keeps plugging away. And the State History Coordinator, who continued on as one of our humanities scholars, incorporated our lesson plans into a class project with a group of social studies educators in training. She had them critique and edit the new lesson plans as a class project. So we've continued to gather useful feedback, and that helps us improve the quality of the materials that we're producing. The lesson plans that we're producing have to be useful. Otherwise, we can't justify the funds and the time that we spend on it. So that is my portion of the presentation, and now you're going to get to hear from Brian, who, again, is the driving force behind this great initiative.
Well, good afternoon. What I want to talk about is a little about the anatomy of each of these lesson plans and how we put these together. I always consider that there's going to be 3 stages in each lesson plan project. The first being a fact-finding stage where I go around and I ask the experts, what do you think we should be doing? We talked to a number of I talked to a number of professionals who are familiar with how to make this project a reality. I talked to, why not go to the very top? We went to Maggie Herrick, who is the social studies specialist for the state of Arkansas, and she was very instrumental in talking to us and telling us what kind of material she'd like us to use and what kind of topics that she thinks that teachers are interested in most. Also talked to a number of professionals who worked at the local colleges, a lot of the people who are in the education departments at each of the local colleges, and asked them for their opinion on what kind of material we should be using, etc. We also talked to, we went around and looked at what other agencies were using, other states, whether it be other archives, what kind of lesson plans are they creating and how are they using their primary sources inside these lesson plans. What she was talking about earlier when she was talking about how we had these teachers come visit us is that what I needed to have happen was to have a lot of feedback, because I consider the feedback is just
a 911 call from my office.
Just the most crucial part.
I'm on a conference call.
And so what we did was we had a focus group come in, and that's what she was talking about when she talked about the teachers who came in and told us everything that they would like to have improved. I considered that morning probably the most valuable part of this project. I think feedback is crucial even if it hurts. And because you're not going to really know how to improve these things unless people tell you what you're doing wrong. So that was one of the most important parts of this project. We also, again, talked to a lot of professors at education departments at the local college level, and sent the lesson plans to them to have them give us some feedback as well. I'm going to show you a little about how we have also integrated our lesson plans into our website. This is our main page, and I've just made screenshots just to make sure that we're not going to hold things up by waiting on an internet connection. This is the main page, and to get to our lesson plans, you would go up to Research and click that, and then a drop-down box will come down, and then you would go down to the Digital Archives section. And in that Digital Archives section is where the lesson plans are. We've gotten really lucky in that we do have this digital page to be able to embed our lesson plans in. Then you would go down and you would look for Arkansas History lesson plans, and you'll see right there we have the lesson plans and also the supplementary material. And the supplementary material are all of the primary sources that we're using in the lesson plans. And I've also, I've added the links to the pages. When you download this, this handy PowerPoint later on, you'll be able to click on those links and it'll take you right to our page. And I do encourage you to please go and take a look at them, not just to drive up our numbers, but so that we will be able to get the feedback from you guys as well. So you see we've got, this is kind of the elements of each one of these lesson plans, and you could take a look at that yourself. We'll go down to the 4 elements of the lesson plans that I consider parts. We've got the essential question that kind of boils the lesson plan down into its basic topic. What is this lesson going to deal with? That way, the teacher doesn't have to look through the entire lesson plan to see what the point is that we're trying to make. Another part of that is to also put the state standards in. Teachers are always wanting to know how are these addressing whatever standards are being used in the state. Another thing we have is the background information on the topic. We understand that not every teacher is an expert on every aspect of Arkansas history. So we want the teachers to be able to get a good idea of what the lesson plan is trying to teach without having to do a lot of research themselves. They've got it all there in 1 or 2 pages. And probably the last part of the lesson plan, and the part that I think is the most important, are the activities. These are activities that we hope are going to engage the students. I'm sure you probably remember when you were in class, when you were in school, you probably thought, oh gosh, I have to listen to the teacher to teach. But then when the teacher brought out some kind of really interesting project, that helped drive the topic home a lot easier. And this is a picture of one of the more recent lesson plans that we've created, one dealing with folk music and how folk music is changed over time. The next step that we needed to do was to be able to promote the lesson plans. And so we wanted to, get the lesson plans out to the public. So probably the first thing, and she talked about this a little bit earlier, was visiting all the educational co-ops. Sometimes they were more cooperative than other times. A lot of times it did feel like I had to drag information out. But, it was still very valuable because not only did it present these lesson plans to the teachers, but it also gave them an opportunity to tell me what they're looking for. And I've treated each one of these visits as kind of a dialogue between me and the teachers. I also went to the Arkansas Curriculum Conference, and it's, again, another good way to promote lesson plans. And I'm going to be at this year's Curriculum Conference next week. So it's something I've been doing for the last 2 years, and I think it's been very, very valuable to what we're doing. Another thing is to learn from other archival institutions, going to conferences, perhaps in other states. Last fall, I visited Tennessee at the Tennessee State Archives, and I understand there may be some of the people I may have met last fall may be listening to me now. And so that was always also good. It gave me an opportunity to trade ideas with other professionals. And again, being open to feedback from teachers is very crucial. So that's pretty much all I had to say. And the last thing I want to mention is that we are trying to coordinate more with teachers about History Day. Last spring, I was a little bit alarmed when I was judging History Day projects and finding that most of the primary sources that students were using were things that they were grabbing off the internet. And I think it would be a great opportunity for us to be able to encourage students to get at least a little bit of experience in going to an archival institution, learning how research takes place in an archive. So
I think that's it from us, but we'd be glad to answer questions now or at the end of the second presentation.
Actually, we're going to hold off on questions until to the end of the second presentation. And thank you, Lisa and Bruce, Brian, excuse me, for a really fascinating presentation. Now we're going to hear from Linda Johnson on California History Day How-tos. Linda is an archivist, too, at California State Archives, where she has worked for nearly 20 years. She is currently the program lead for education and outreach and has served as co-lead for the reference program and state records appraisal program. Prior to state service, Linda was the collections manager for Shields Library Special Collections at the University of California, Davis, and assistant archivist at the Center for Sacramento History. Linda earned her BA in Liberal Studies and MA in Public History from the California State University at Sacramento. Linda?
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here with you on this somewhat sprinkly day in Sacramento. I hope maybe we'll see some of you next week at the Best Practices Exchange, and maybe we'll actually have some sunny weather again by then. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the State Archives in general, and then I want to talk about what we've done to kind of build a partnership with to provide History Day students with an opportunity to visit the archives and to learn basic research methodologies and what they can do to make their projects shine. So the California State Archives, let's get this going here. There we go. The California State Archives is a division of the Secretary of State's office, and we're located in Sacramento within walking distance of the state capitol. And we are the repository for state government records, and we currently house about 130,000 cubic feet of records spanning the years 1849 to the current day. We have records from all three branches of state government, and we hold about 300 or so collections of personal papers from state legislators, and we have just a few private collections, but not many. For the most part, our collections really do focus on records of state government. The archives occupies approximately 1/2 of the Secretary of State's complex. There we go. And for such a large building, we have a fairly small staff. You're going to hear some repetition from what we just heard from the folks in Arkansas about several different things, staffing, resources, and such. So I think that's a common thread we will hear throughout. We do have a fairly small staff, but we have 6 floors of staff, 6 floors of stacks with a dedicated staffing space and 4 of those floors. And we can really go days without seeing each other because of the configuration of the office and the workspaces. Senior archivists act as program leads for functions such as accessioning and processing, reference, education and outreach, exhibits, records appraisal, and so on. But we all participate in those activities, and then we are also expected to participate in the outreach activities. I moved from reference coordinator to education and outreach coordinator in January of 2012. You know, we've had a number of outreach events, but they were all handled by different archivists, and the idea behind creating the E&O program was to bring those activities together and to hopefully start some kind of educational program beyond our exhibits. I'd been involved in History Day as a judge and had been thinking about what we could do to help the kids get into the archives. You know, we always say be careful what you wish for, because in August of 2012, we received an email from Gwen Granados, who's the director of NARA at Riverside, and she was asking if the California Archives could host a kickoff event similar to the event held at the Nixon Presidential Library in Southern California. At that time, NARA San Bruno, which would be the Northern California a branch of NARA, was without a director, and there had been numerous requests to have something in Northern California. So of course we said yes, but where to begin? The first thing we needed to do was create a partnership, because early on in the process, I, as the Education Outreach Coordinator, while I was really enthusiastic, I recognized that our staff are not History Day experts. Many of us have judged entries over time, but we really didn't know how to put those entries together. Most of us don't have classroom experience, nor do we have the connections with the teachers that we would need in the hundreds of school districts in what is a very large portion of the state. And the event would be in addition to current assignments, so staff time and resources had to be considered. Finally, having been involved in local arrangements and program planning professional organizations, I know that collaboration is the key to a successful event. So while we lacked history expertise, classroom connections, and extra resources, we do have a mission to educate and a staff of experienced archivists, most who are willing to participate and give up a Saturday. And we have a building full of records just waiting to be used. And perhaps most appreciated is the fact that we can provide free facilities for programs that we partner in or co-sponsor. So Gwen put me in touch with a dynamo in the California History Day movement, Whitney Olson. There it goes. Whitney is the director of the Sonoma County History Education Project, and she has extensive experience in so many different aspects of History Day. I've been so fortunate to be able to work with her. In addition to Whitney, we corralled Sacramento County Office of Education's Craig Irish into becoming one of our partners. And then we also brought in Dylan McDonald from the Center for Sacramento History. And with Craig's input, those connections with the school districts were kind of formed through the SCOE, the Sacramento County Office of Education. And that was really helpful because, again, we didn't have that classroom connection. So after much conversation and discussion, we started planning the event. We chose December 8th for our first History Day How-tos, or what we call HDHT 1.0. And this first year, planning fell mostly to Whitney and myself. I was pretty much responsible for facilities as well as scheduling staff for a variety of talks and tasks. Whitney worked on getting the word out to the schools and handled the registration process. One of the issues that I faced with scheduling was that at that time we could not have our hourly staff members work because we were under a no overtime allowed order. And that didn't affect the archivists because we were what you might consider salaried and we don't get overtime. But it did take away from the ability to use our hourly staffers in areas that I did have to fill in with the archivists. One of the activities that we were requested to provide were 15-minute reference interviews with archivists and librarians. Over the 4 years of the event, the Ask an Archivist interviews have been by far the most popular. In addition to archivists from the state archives, I was able to recruit folks from the California State Library, the Center for Sacramento History, the Sacramento Public Library, the Hoover Institute at Stanford, the California Digital Library, and the California Historical Society. And invitations also went out to University of California at Davis and California State University, Sacramento. So you can see here the schedule we have for HDHT 1.0. We ended up with 4 research sessions, 3 project sessions, as well as Ask an Archivist and tour times. The sessions were then repeated in the afternoon. The students were actually assigned to these sessions and were given quote-unquote release time to have the interviews with the archivist. So after this first year, we did kind of have an evaluation and reviewed how the scheduling worked, and we made a couple of changes for the next HDHT 2.0. And this is the format that we followed pretty much for the next one for 2.0 and 3.0. Whitney had suggested having category sessions led by experienced NHD teachers. And this worked very well, and we were fortunate to have some great presenters for those category sessions. Students were again assigned to the sessions and their interview times. We opted not to have interviews during the category sessions because there's always a lot of questions from the students how to put their projects together. So we really wanted them to focus on that first hour on how to put their projects together. And then in the later times, we had the research sessions, which they were allowed to go then to the Ask an Archivist interviews. So by this time, Craig and his crew from the Sacramento County Office of Education took on the registration, which relieved Whitney of that kind of burdensome task. And Craig and his crew then assigned the students to the sessions. And Whitney identified and invited the category session leaders. And again, I handled facilities and scheduled the interviews with the archivist. And this division of labor worked really well for History Day How-Tos 2.0 through 4.0. And we did have a little bit of a change when it came to History Day How-Tos 3.0 in that we moved it to November. The day was planned out similarly to the prior year with category sessions first, followed by the research sessions. For HDHT 3.0, we also separated out the 4th and 5th graders. In California, those 4th and 5th graders can participate in poster categories and they can advance to state, but they don't advance onto the national competition. And the reason we decided to separate them out was, you know, there's a really big difference in how a 4th grader learns and how someone in junior high learns. So we thought it would be best to really have the 4th and 5th graders kind of together, separated out from the older students. Although a lot of the older students were wonderful at mentoring the youngsters, so that was kind of an interesting thing to see happen throughout the different events that we held. We retained the November slot here, and again, you can see the schedule breakdown in some of the sessions that we looked at. As with everybody else, you know, they seem to think everything is available online. So we really wanted to focus on just the fact that stuff that's online is really just the tip of the iceberg. And then we had some folks doing research type sessions on using library databases and how to cite your sources and things of that nature, things that are all very important when you're doing any kind of historical presentation. So for History Day How-Tos 4.0, we kept the the November date, but we kind of reworked everything. For this particular event, we decided to keep the students together by what project they were doing. So all the kids that were doing documentaries stayed together for the entire day. The kids that were doing websites stayed together for the entire day. In previous events, we kind of kept them together maybe perhaps by school, but in this time we decided to try a little different approach and keep them together in their categories. And the focus shifted more toward creating the project from beginning to end with sessions called Investigate, Build, and Create. We still had the Ask an Archivist interview scheduled throughout the day. And this seemed to work really well. The only concern we had was that it seemed that the scheduling of the Ask an Archivist would draw a number of students from one of the category sessions. So we had a presenter who maybe had 2 students in their create portion of the day, and all of the rest were at the interviews with the archivist. So it didn't work as well as we had hoped. So that's kind of how we did the days. We did encourage students, to give us feedback. We got feedback from a number of teachers as well. We had an evaluation sheet for the first 2, but you know how evaluations are. You never get enough of them at the end of the day. I do want to talk a little bit about how we did as far as the number of students that we had, number of participants we had. So for the first day, we were pretty happy with how things turned out. We had 170 participants from 8 different counties, and again, this is mostly Northern California, and California being such a large state, it still took travel time to get students here. We had students coming from as far away as Fresno and Tulare County, so in fact, a couple of them, busloads, got delayed because fog was so heavy down in the Central Valley, in the southern part of the valley, and they wanted to wait until that fog lifted before they came up the freeway. But as you can see, we had pretty good participation for the first 3 History Day how-tos. When we came to HD 4.0, we lost a little bit there, and we think that a couple of things happened on that particular event. We didn't know that on that particular November day there were also 2 charity walks in downtown Sacramento. So this meant closures, and there were a lot more uniformed police officers directing traffic. This was the day after the horrific Paris attacks, and my thought is that upon seeing a stronger than usual police force out and about, as well as numerous street closures very close to the Capitol, there might have been some people who were really hesitant about coming into the archives. And because of the street closures, most people unfamiliar with the downtown grid likely could not get to our free parking that was available. And with the thousands who came for those walks, our free parking filled up very quickly with non-History Day participants. And that issue was specific to History Day How-tos 4.0, but there were a few things that came up during the other events that kind of made us look at things and how we could kind of tweak things in the future. And perhaps the most troublesome is simply a lack of space. The archives proper, we have a staff library that can seat 65, a small meeting room that can seat 30, a large meeting room that can seat 55, and we use the back of the microfilm viewing room for an additional 60 seats. And those numbers represent the capacities if we're looking at lecture-style seating. Because many of these activities had hands-on portions of it, we really needed it set up classroom style, which really cut down on the number of chairs we could have in each room with the tables that we had available to use. We also had available to us the auditorium, the Secretary of State Auditorium, which is a great room. It seats 250 people, but it's really too large of a room for all of the events. And the fact that we only used it for the introduction and the plenary session and the welcome, it kind of lost its ability to really be used over the event. And another thing is to get to the auditorium, you have to go out of the archives, cross the courtyard, enter the other side of the complex. And in addition to the auditorium, we also use the museum classrooms, museum conference room and classroom. And to get to these rooms, you have to proceed to the 2nd floor and wend one's way through the museum exhibits, which is not simple nor straightforward. And it doesn't matter how many signs and arrows we place, the best way to get the students to where they are supposed to be is by having staff posted at various strategic locations to point them in the right direction. And those are staff that could have been used in other activities. While we want to see History Day How-tos grow, I think we would pretty much reach capacity at about 200 participants. The auditorium is ideal for the times, like I said, that we have everyone together. But for the rest of the time, the kids are divided into different groups. And some of those categories are far more popular than others. So like performances and papers have relatively low numbers. I think maybe we had 5, a handful in each of those sessions. Whereas the documentaries, the websites, and the exhibits are extremely popular, and lots of students in those particular sessions, and the rooms were, quite frankly, overfilled. Another issue we had was that during the registration process, we had asked the students that if their parents were going to accompany them, to please have their parents register so that we could get an idea of the seating needed and what room to assign for each of those particular activities. Well, unfortunately, a lot of the parents did not register. We certainly encourage parent participation, so we didn't want to turn anyone away, but we really needed those numbers so we could make better use of what space we did have, or we do have, I should say. Another issue that came up was the actual scheduling the event date. You know, school districts have a number of starting dates, and then the private schools are on their own schedule. And we don't have any control over that, but we did try to find a Saturday that works for the majority of students. And as with every other student in school around, we're also competing with soccer, SATs, PSATs, and all the other things that happen on Saturdays. So at the end of History Day How-tos 4.0, it was last year, we scheduled 5.0 for Saturday, December 3rd of this year. But a few weeks ago, I spoke with the partners, and we concluded, because of unanticipated scheduling conflicts, that we would cancel HDHT 5.0. We also want to take the break to rethink what works best, not just for the students, but also for the participating institutions. The hiatus was actually well-timed, as I was informed a few days later that I would be working on a new project, and that would take me away from History Day activities. Whitney and Craig are now the California State Coordinators for National History Day, and they are anxious to continue the partnership formed with the archives. I cannot speak to what the future might hold for History Day How-tos, but my hope is that there will be a continuing collaborative effort that will provide history students with a unique experience and will introduce today's youngsters to the wonderful world of archives. That's in a nutshell where we are. I think there's a lot more that we could do and that I hope we can do. It does, again, get back to that whole idea of staff resources, time, events, you know, all that stuff that plays together for, I think, all of us in trying to get these, get the word out about what our collections hold and how much of a resource they can be for not just History Day students, but for the general public as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. And now we'd like to open it up to questions. And I see one already from Anne to all of the participants. What would you do differently in approaching collaborations like this?
Well, I have to say, in a perfect world, we have unlimited money and can go and visit all the teachers that we want to. But quite frankly, I think the approach that we've been taking right now has been very effective, and I can't really think of any way off the top of my head to improve things. I have really been interested in listening to the last speaker and how they've been bringing in students and teachers about History Day. And I think that's something that we'll probably try to follow, at least in whatever way that we can.
And I am really impressed with what you guys have done with your online content and getting the lesson plans up. There are a number of things I do outside of our History Day How-tos. Our county coordinators are very good about providing teacher workshops, and I've taken those teacher workshops and talking to teachers about what the archives have. And I've also had a couple of teacher workshops where I've had the teachers actually come in and learn how to use a finding aid and learn how to request materials, because a lot of our teachers, and I think you kind of alluded to that as well, don't have the education as far as how to do the methodology behind doing research. And I think for us, perhaps focusing more on getting our teachers prepared in the classroom would be perhaps a better approach. I'm not sure.
I agree, and I think that would be and in fact, when I was thinking about the History Day program, thinking we could even have just a separate day just for teachers to come in and learn how to use our materials and how to search for things, that kind of stuff.
It's true. The projects really approach History Day from two different perspectives or points. Here's another question for you all. Linda mentioned evaluation. What sort of evaluation and this is to everybody, or assessment do you do, to assess impact?
Well, this is Lisa in Arkansas. really right now the only assessment that we've been doing is just monitoring the statistics and content DM to track the usage of the collections. So not the most direct way to assess the kind of impact that that our lesson plans might be having with Arkansas teachers, but you know, we have some idea of how that they are being used.
And this is Linda, and because ours was an actual event here, we did have evaluation forms for the students and for parents and teachers or mentors, whoever might be accompanying the student. And like I said, the problem with those evaluation forms is you rarely get many of them back, but we did pay attention to the handful we did get back, and there's some very good suggestions in there. And we didn't do it in the last History How-tos. I think we just one of those things that kind of got pushed to the side or something. But because we have this ongoing conversation, especially with the Sacramento County History Day coordinators, the teachers there brought in some ideas into the workshops that were being presented during by the Sacramento County Office of Education. So we were able to get feedback from that as well. We haven't seen a huge number of students come into the archives. We've had a handful now and then looking at state government records, but I think that's one of the really hard things is how do we get folks to use resources? A lot of the teachers are using the History Day, it's part of their curriculum. They're incorporating History Day into their curriculum, and the focus seems to be, you know, a much broader view, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that, but if you want kids to use local resources, you need to talk about local history.
Absolutely. I'm also struck by how lean both institutions are, and it's impressive that you're able to dedicate, you know, the time and effort to successful National History Day events. Do any of you all have plans to leverage what you've done with National History Day to try to get support for adding education and outreach staff?
Well, again, this is in Arkansas, and I don't see that on the horizon in Arkansas in the immediate future. We just finished budget hearings today for the next biennium, and we are not receiving any new positions for the next 2 years.
And this is Linda, and I really can't speak to what's going on with budgets, but my guess is it's probably not something that's going to get any kind of specifically earmarked position or anything like that. It will be with what resources we have available.
Are there any other questions? And while I'm waiting to see if there are, I would mention that visit the National History Day website, nhd.org, if you wish to find out more. So seeing no other questions, I'm going to turn it back over to Ann to close it out.
Thanks, John. And thank you, Lisa, Brian, and Linda. That was just really great. What a wonderful webinar to end our webinar series on for 2016. I just want to take a few minutes to close us out here, and of course remind you that as soon as you close yourself out, you will see an automatic pop-up for a webinar evaluation, and we really appreciate the feedback that you give us. So if you would, take a few minutes to fill out the evaluation. That's a great help to our program committee as we're planning webinars for next year, which we're in the thick of and about ready to wrap up. So that's very helpful. We've got some upcoming webinars. Well, these are the 2017, what we're working on. We've got a new theme for 2017. It's on grant planning and management. But we'll begin 2017 with some old favorites. In January, the various board and committee leaders will be talking about what's on tap for CoSA in 2017, so giving you kind of a rundown of what to expect for the year. And then on February 23rd, our first of 2 SHRAB town halls will take place. Always very informative webinars, and we really look forward to that. And coming in beginning in November and lasting until June of 2017 will be a series of webinars on practical digital preservation applications. This is a series that is being done in conjunction with our SERI, State Electronic Records Initiative project, and Preservica. So we'll be announcing those as they get finalized, and they're very close to being finalized. So we'll have some information out there shortly about dates and topics and all that kind of good stuff. Oops, I'm sorry, Becky. You're doing a great job here, and I'm just screwing it up. Did I yes, I overshot. Did I shoot too much? No, I did that. Okay. Well, the next up is BPE, and now I can't seem to advance the slide, so there we go.
Yep, we're good. We're on the BPE page.
Oh, well, I'm glad you are, because I'm not seeing that, but that's okay. BPE is around the corner, as Linda said, and we know we've got a number of State Archive staff going to it from different parts of the country. If any of you out in the audience are state archivists and are planning to go to BPE, if you could be in touch with me, I would love to hear from you. We have an assignment for a state archivist who might be at BPE, and I'd like to tell you about that. So let me know. Is there anything else on that slide? Becky, you're going to have to tell me because I can't advance my slides here any longer.
The ARM survey.
And the ARM survey, our biennial Archives and Records Management Survey is underway. We're collecting data with a deadline of the 23rd of November. That's the day before Thanksgiving, and we felt that that was an appropriate day. We thought it would be a great incentive for people to get their ARM survey done so that they could actually enjoy their Thanksgivings without having ARM hanging over their heads. Thank you. Each year, CoSA's corporate sponsors and their partnerships provide critical funding support for many of our membership activities and our events. So we're especially grateful to Ancestry and our other corporate sponsors featured here, Family Search, Preservica, Gaylord Archival, and Apex Software. And of course, support for CoSA's program initiatives is also generously provided by grants from NHPRC and the IMLS. And our last slide gives you a lot of links to how you can stay connected with us. We've got an active Facebook page and Twitter feed. Our blogs, our blog postings through our website have been very active lately, talking about Archives Month activities. So there's many ways for you to stay in touch with us. And of course, you can always email us or give us a call if you need to talk with us or request specific things from us. So thank you all once again for hanging in there. I know we're a little past our hour, but this has been just a delightful program, and I've learned so much. And thank you to our CoSA program committee, who has done yeoman's work pulling these webinars together. They're just a terrific team to work with. So we will see you next year in January 2017 with our first kickoff webinar for that year. We hope you join us for as many as you can. And we appreciate your support this year. So take care, everybody. We'll see you next year. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.